Welcome back to PPC Office Hours. My name is Michelle Kop from Level 28 Media.
And I'm Stu Atkins from Atkins Marketing Solutions.
And in today's podcast episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive into call tracking. So if you are a professional service-based business and you are looking to generate leads from your website or landing pages through pay-per-click advertising, this is definitely a video to watch, especially or podcast to listen to, especially if you want to drive as many phone calls as possible from your ads. We are going to be doing a deep dive into call tracking, talk about different call tracking tools, native call tracking applications within Google Ads, and let's go ahead and dive in. So Stu, let's go ahead and just dive into this. What exactly is call tracking? How would you explain this to someone that is very new to Google PPC?
Well, it's a great question, Michelle. There's two different layers to call tracking. A lot of people don't understand what it means simply because there's the Google offer of mobile click to call ads that you can run. And then there's advanced call tracking in which you utilize a third party tool that offers a lot more features than what Google offers relative to the details and the nuances of call tracking. Google offers basically, you can insert the phone number, it'll show up underneath the ads. They can click on that, it will dial the number, and then it will register as a conversion and directly call the number for the specific client or company or business. And it does Google does not measure the length of call. Google does not record the calls, but it does allow you to insert the phone number for mobile click to call ads, which can be beneficial, but that's just one layer of it. The second layer of it is what Michelle's referring to, and what we're going to talk about in more detail is advanced call tracking. And that's where, as I mentioned, use a third party tool that has a lot more features and there's more details involved with that. And you can track it from a conversion standpoint and the reporting details. And the benefits of it are far above and beyond the basics of what Google offers. You want to run both mobile click to call and advanced call tracking, but we'll get into some of the details. And I'll ask you, Michelle, what are some of the things that advanced call tracking offers in detail? Can you give some examples relative to what Google doesn't offer?
Yeah, so actually, just to back things up, when we're talking about advanced call tracking, we're talking about using like third-party tools, and I'm just going to throw them out there just so that anyone
Yeah,
here that's watching it is interested in exploring. There's call tracking metrics, which is what I use. I think you use that
me
too,
too. I
Stu.
use that too.
And then there's also call rail. Those are like the two biggest ones.
Yeah.
And essentially, they work very similarly. You just drop a JavaScript code onto your website or landing page, and then you would pick a special phone number that you would route to your direct line. So pretty much you would pick, let's say your area code is like an 818. You can buy an 818 phone number and route it directly to your line, so that you have one special phone number. So whenever someone calls that number, you know exactly that they came from PPC or any other source. It's not just for PPC. You could use call tracking for billboards. You could use it for paid social, LinkedIn, anything really. And the beauty of it is you could buy special local phone numbers. You could also buy 800 numbers as well, and then route everything to your line. So you have a special phone number for every source and medium on your in your marketing flow. Additionally, you can set call recordings so you can listen to every phone call. And this is not anything like super new, but it's definitely something that can be, leveraged to your advantage so that you can listen in on the quality of the phone calls. And you can also, see how good your customer service staff is doing in terms of picking up the phone, fielding the leads, and making sure that they're doing a good job and their best job to actually have them take the next step which is potentially, scheduling a consultation, or, even turning them into an actual, paid client or customer for you. So that's also key. Another thing too is keyword attribution. You will be able to see exactly which keyword your ads are, which keywords are leading to the phone calls, or which keyword search terms, not search terms, keywords that are triggering the phone calls.
Yeah.
So let's say that, you're running an ad for an orthodontist. You'll be able to see if someone calls that someone searched orthodontist near me. So then you'll know, okay, this is the keyword that we should be prioritizing and put more money towards, because we're able to see that keyword attribution. Just to back things up, Stu, this is not super recent. I think at least within the last couple of years, Google's gotten a little bit more sophisticated with
Yeah.
their call tracking. They do actually have a call recording feature, but it's not the best. And it's not something that they made like a huge announcement about. It was just kind of something that slipped under the radar. And they do have a feature where you can enable it and you can listen to phone calls within the Google native UI platform, or Google Ads itself. But it's only, the phone calls are only available for 30 days. And then after that, they go away. Whereas when you're using CallRail or call tracking metrics, you're actually able to listen to the phone calls forever, and you have the actual recordings in case you ever want to go back on it. So Google has gotten a little bit more sophisticated in that way, but it's definitely nowhere near as sophisticated as, with call tracking metrics or CallRail, these third party advanced tools. And on top of that, with these third party advanced tools, you can rate the phone call. So if it's a bad phone call, you don't need to import it into Google. You can say, okay, this was bad. This is not good quality. I'm not even going to train the algorithm to optimize towards these, leads, because it's not even a lead. It's a phone call that maybe they were calling about employment or some other junk. You don't need to import that. So you don't want to be feeding the wrong data into Google. So that's another thing too. You can really field out the quality of the leads when you're using a more advanced call tracking software, versus with Google, you can tell Google, okay, count every call over a minute, count every call over 30 seconds as a qualified lead. But the problem is, we don't know if someone that was talking to someone for 30 seconds was even qualified. Maybe they were, again, looking for a job. So when you actually take the time to listen to the phone call, and then you can tell the call tracking software, is this qualified or not, and import that data back into Google, you're going to get richer data for the algorithm to start producing you better quality results. Any
Yeah.
other
Good.
comments on that?
um, well, and some of the detail that a good call tracking tool will provide. One thing we did mention, it does cost money.
Yeah.
There's there's a there's a you pay for a phone number, you pay for a monthly fee, and so there is a cost involved with that. What will be tracked is the call length. So it will report and give you the total call length, and you can average out the call length and the reporting. I'll do that with clients. I'll let them know, okay, your average call length for the months was 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Or generally speaking, if your average call length is over 1.5 to 2 minutes, that's good. Depends on the industry and what they're calling about. So you can sense engagement as far as that goes. You can also it will give you details of the devices. Was it iPhone? Was it
Yeah.
Droid type phones? Was it generic phones? Uh, also, it's permission based. So at the beginning of the call, it'll say this call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes. So legally, the caller needs to be notified that this is a permission based call. So they're not. So they do know they're being recorded. And if they don't like that, they can hang up. But they are notified. People often ask about that. And some of the more what's utilized is called dynamic call insertion. Michelle mentioned the JavaScript, and then that phone number shifts.
It'll
They may
swap.
see, yeah, it swaps the phone number to the phone number that you selected and paid for to utilize for a specific account or client. And back to the recording of the phone calls, uh, that can be an invaluable tool. Michelle and I worked with a client for at least a couple of years that the call reward recordings were valuable in that it would tell the owner of the business, for example, if you had a new customer service representative that was on the phone, maybe they were answering the questions incorrectly or they weren't providing enough information. And you can take those call recordings and then you can utilize those as a training tool for brand new employees. So you can actually download the call recording, send it to the client. Say you have 10 or 15 quality phone calls, and you could have a new employee listen to those phone calls as a training tool. And that's extremely valuable. And they could pick up on a quality customer service representative, the methodologies they're using and the way they're communicating with the customer, and it will accelerate the learning curve for employees who are going to be on the phone interacting with customers. It will also tell you which ads were generating the call. And what I do, I will download an Excel spreadsheet with an overview. Often it will give you the name,
Mm-hmm.
and it will give you the name, the phone number, the location of where the person was calling from, and then the call length. So, and then more details. And so I'll download an Excel spreadsheet and I'll modify it, and I will include that in monthly reporting to the client. I have one client that all they want is phone calls nationwide, and they love that report. And it's extremely valuable for them to get that information. So they have just kind of they have an automatic lead follow up tool with the Excel spreadsheet with all the contact information. They can run that by sales, and and they can also cross pollinate that with CRM tool, et cetera, et cetera. So the granularity of the detail is really helpful and really important.
Yeah. Another thing too that I want to mention, call length. That I would say call length, it used to be something that would pay a lot of attention to, but really the quality of the phone call really is the what we should really be paying attention to
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end of the day, right? Like,
yep,
even if a call length was 10 minutes, what if they were on hold for 10 minutes? Like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then they never actually spoke with anyone. So listening in on the phone calls with a call recording. Another thing too is you don't necessarily need to have call recordings enabled, but it's going to give you richer data. So if you feel a little bit uncomfortable about like recording your staff, which I don't think anyone should. I mean, you should be listening in on your staff, but I have some clients that are just like, I don't know if I want to be like recording my staff because it seems like it's an invasion, blah, blah, blah. Then you don't need it, but you could also use call tracking software for keyword attribution or the other benefits that I mentioned. But if you want to use it to the best, to the best of its ability, you should definitely enable the call tracking so that you'll be able to listen in on everything that's going on.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
point. I had a client. I've had a client for many years that all they want is phone calls for their lead gen, and when their employees found out that we were recording the phone calls, they freaked out,
yeah,
and
they
so
got
we
uncomfortable.
turned it off, and no big deal. It didn't impact lead quality or anything, and it was they were kind enough to inform their employees, let them know, and so we turned it off. But Michelle's right. You can turn it on. You can turn it off on an as needed basis. One other thing I thought of, uh, some of the advanced call tracking tools can utilize transcript
Hmm.
analysis. Talk
Sentiment.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
talk about that, Michelle, because that can be if you really want to get into granular, high level detail, talk about that.
Yeah, so I haven't actually used it, but I know exactly what it is. Basically, what it will do is it will take the information based off the phone call, and they'll automatically transcribe it, and then
Yeah,
they will give you like a sentiment analysis of like, okay,
yeah,
was it
sentiment
good?
analysis.
Was it bad? So you don't need to necessarily sit there and listen to every phone call. It will kind of use its AI to just like scan everything and then just tell you was this a good or a bad phone call. Again, do you trust AI? That's another thing. Like you still have to want to, like, cross check it if you want, but it's definitely something, like, if you're trying to field a bunch of phone calls and see what quality it was or what type of sentiment it was, using that type of transcription tool is going to be like probably the fastest way, instead of sitting in on every single phone call and listening on on everything. And these features are all like added features. They don't come all like they come built in, but then you have to pay more for them. So
Yeah.
the call recording, if you enable the call recording, it's going to cost a little bit more. If you're going to want the call transcriptions, it's going to cost a little bit more. But it's very rich data that you can use, not just to inform you on your PPC strategy, but just the strategy of your overall business, like your business operations. If you don't have the operations in place, why should you even be running PPC at the end of the day? You and I have worked with so many clients where we work with them, and then a lot of them say that they have good operations, but then the minute we get the call tracking set up, we listen to the first few phone calls, we're like, oh man, like these people are
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
not ready to be doing PPC, because they don't even have the operations in place. And a lot of times, a lot of business owners, they do not want to face the reality that their customer service representatives are not the best, or that they don't want to invest in the training. They know that they know, but then they don't want to actually make any changes. So at the end of the day, who ends up getting the boot? It's usually the PPC agency, because the PPC agency can only do so much in order to generate the traffic, but then we can't actually close the leads. Like it's pretty much at that point we pass the basketball to to the next team member, but the next team member can't shoot the hoop because they just don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What about phone calls versus form fills? There's something about live human to human
Yeah.
interaction with a phone call that and it depends on the client
And the industry
and the
too.
industry.
Yeah. If
But
we're
I
looking
think there's
at
so much you can glean from a phone call.
local service-based businesses, I'm talking doctors, dentists, lawyers. Um, you're definitely going to be getting more phone calls, and you should be getting more phone calls, and you would want more phone calls, because people that are calling are typically more serious. Form submissions, yes, they can be serious too, but there's a reason why they're submitting a form. Maybe they're on the job, maybe they're at school, maybe there's something that's preventing them from actually picking up the phone and dialing. And then it's harder to get around to calling them back and getting them on the phone, versus when someone's calling you directly, all you need to do is just answer it, and then field their questions and try to convert them to the next step. So that's really important. I've had some clients though, and again, it depends on the industry. Like the travel industry, they don't really want phone calls, because they don't want their sales team to be held up on the phone for that long. They would prefer just people to submit an inquiry, and then they'll get back to them. But then the problem too is, when you have form submissions, getting in touch with people can be very challenging too. So it's just
Yeah.
finding that balance. But typically for local service based businesses, phone calls is the way to go. But having a form submission there is also something that can be valuable in the case that someone at that time doesn't want to talk to someone right away, and they want to call back later.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good point you alluded to briefly of it often depends on the bandwidth of the sales team. And
Yeah,
sometimes sales will go with both calls and form fills, and then realize, you know what,
you can't handle it.
we'll shift to form fill and integrate it with HubSpot or a CRM, and then that way if the sales team has limited bandwidth, it gives them more control over following up. However, on the form fill side, they got to follow up quick. I mean,
Yeah.
the sooner the better. So if you're going to do call tracking with lead generation, you really want to have the back end sales
Operations
team
setup. Yeah.
ready to go, ready to rock and roll. And because if your sales team is not following up on phone calls, or it's going into voicemail. And that's another issue. You want to make sure your voicemail system, if you get after hours calls, depending on when you're running your ads, you want to make sure that voicemail system doesn't run out of storage. We've had clients in the past that did that. That's terrible for
Yeah, and
customer experience.
yeah, customers
And
can't leave voicemails because it's all
that
backed up.
that's
Or
terrible.
another option, Stu, is you can even forward the calls to like a third party like call answering service
Yeah,
too.
exactly. It's a
Again,
good
that's
point.
going to cost you some more money, but if you don't have the resources for that, well, just make sure that your voicemail system is set up.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because if you're a competitor, a client that you and I worked with for a number of years, I remember one time I called their competitor, and the competitor answered the phone.
Yeah,
And the client we were working with at the time, sales, they weren't even answering the phone at the time. They were going to voicemail.
yeah,
And and so even though we had call tracking set up, that competitor that answers the phone has an immediate advantage. They're probably going to get the lead and turn it into a sale versus
yeah,
a company that doesn't have someone. So it's just, bottom
yeah,
line is, if you're going to do call tracking, make sure the back end is ready to rock and roll and to accommodate calls that are coming in. One other thing I thought of, Michelle, what about bot calls? What about those irritating spam calls? Is there any, do these call advanced call tracking tools allow you to filter those out or clean
yeah.
that up? What about that?
It happens, but it's not like a super common thing. If it happens, there are ways that you can block the phone calls from happening again, and that's typically what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. It happens. I hate them, but it's just the matter of finding a way to block them, and just make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll use different phone numbers to keep calling, but no, I don't really see that as big of an issue. Um, yeah,
Yeah. So the bottom line is, don't ignore the phone.
yeah,
I tell clients often, I say, do you realize you can take this device, you can pick it up, you can call someone, and a human will answer, and you can talk to them.
yeah,
And there's no substitute for a phone call.
yeah,
People are often shocked if they're talking to a real human. And
yeah,
it's a part of customer experience and customer engagement that you don't want to ignore, and it can set you apart from your competitors often, provided you
yeah.
have, as we've mentioned, a lot of the things in place that we've covered today. But phone calls, human to human talking, is always going to be a great way to enhance your lead generation across the board, and your business across the board.
Yeah, one other thing I want to touch on, we're talking about voicemails. We should make sure that, even if it goes to voicemail, that at least you have a voicemail box set up. Ideally, you don't even want it to go to voicemail. Ideally,
Yeah.
you would want someone
Yep.
to answer it. So
I
if
agree.
you know for sure at 5 o'clock, there's not going to be someone to answer the phone. You could set an ad schedule to make sure that your ads turn off at a time that is a time that is reasonable for your sales team. If your sales team's not able to be in the office or to take the phone calls at that time. So there are ways to mitigate. Just make sure, like, I ideally wouldn't want it to go to voicemail, but if it has to, it has to, and hopefully you have something set up.
Yeah. Agreed.
But yeah, because like I'm thinking from a customer service perspective, even for me, if I called some local business and I was hoping to have them help me fix my backyard, the sliding door to my backyard, if it goes to voicemail and I'm trying to get a hold of someone, I'm just going to go to the next person in line. I'm not even going to wait around for you. And that actually happened to me. I had my backyard sliding door break one day, and it was before we're planning to go to Mexico, and I was desperate to find some help, because it was just the day before we're going on vacation. I called a company, they never answered. Then I called the next one in line, and then eventually, the first company called me back and was like, "Hey, we got a missed call from this number." I'm like, "Well, too bad. I already moved on."
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
people on Google are not loyal. We have to remember they're brand agnostic. We've talked about this before. They're definitely not loyal. They're going to be looking around. They've got a wandering eye. So what can you do to set up be set apart. Make sure you answer the phone calls. That's it. And, have great customer service. And it's there. I hate to say this, but the bar is very low. So, yeah,
Yeah.
when it comes
Yeah.
to, great customer service and, responding to people on Google.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Did you have anything else, Stu, that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we covered a lot of the key areas, and I think it's just a great way to set things apart. If you can utilize advanced call tracking, it's definitely worth using.
Yeah, it's definitely worth an investment. The investment, I can't remember exactly how much it costs. Maybe like $130 for call tracking for the agency starter plan, plus additional, like, I don't know, 15 cents a minute or something for every record if you do the call recording. So
Yeah.
it's definitely not cheap. But it's definitely something worth investing in, especially if you want to have the ability to, actually listen to the phone calls and use the richer data in order to optimize. But remember, we are using the agency plan. Maybe if you're using just a single plan, it could be a lot cheaper. And if you
Yep.
are on a very tight budget, you just know that there are recording tools within the Google interface, but it's just not as sophisticated, and there are a lot of limitations there with them. So
Oh,
if
one
you,
thing I forgot. One
yeah,
thing I forgot. Texting. Don't some of the call tracking, I think, does call
you
tracking
can
metric,
text.
there's a texting feature too.
Yeah,
I
there's a
haven't used
texting
it yet.
feature. Yeah. Yeah. So SMS, again, that's going to cost you a little bit more. But if you want to get in touch with someone, probably the most fastest and intimate way of getting in touch with someone is going to be through texting. Most people don't leave their texts unread. A lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
leave emails unread. A lot of people, they don't answer phone calls, but they will look at the text messages. So if it's really hard for you to follow up with people and to get people on the phone, texting is a great way. But also be mindful too. It might seem a little bit invasive because people, they're on their phone and all of a sudden they just get a message from some company that maybe they had one or two interactions with, and they're like, oh, okay, that's I don't want to deal with that. So there's a fine balance.
But it is a layer that's been added for some of the call tracking tools. So I forgot to mention that earlier. So that's an additional option, a layer that you can add if and at least test it, could be valuable depending on the industry too.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in to PPC Office Hours, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you very much.